Hello and welcome back to the Mental Game Gym podcast, where we break down tools, habits, and mindset shifts that help athletes perform at their best and help coaches lead with purpose. I'm glad you're here today because this is a different episode. This is one for coaches. So whether you're coaching youth, teens, or even elite level athletes, you're in a position to influence how your players think, feel, respond, and grow. Not just as athletes, but also as people. And here's the truth. Your athlete's mindset plays a bigger role than most people realize. It shapes how they show up after a mistake. It affects how they handle pressure and setbacks and adversity. And it impacts whether they enjoy the game or burn out trying to meet expectations. The thing about enjoyment, that's one of the number one reasons why kids quit sport. They're not having fun anymore. So as coaches, we have to always battle with that question of how do we make this enjoyable for these people, for these kids? How do I keep them in the sport for as long as possible? And most of it comes back to that fun piece. They're not enjoying it. They're not having fun anymore. That's why they quit. So today I want to give you 5 mindset habits that great coaches use to build mentally stronger athletes and people. And all of these 5 things are based on both what I see when I'm working with athletes and teams and coaches and parents, and also from other great coaches like John Wooden, for example, who didn't just build championship teams, he built people. So let's get into these 5 things that coaches can do to improve their athletes' mindset. The first one is really important, and it is normalize the mental game. One of the biggest problems that I see is that athletes feel like they're the only one dealing with nerves or overthinking or fear of failure. They think everyone else has it all together. So when their mind feels messy, they assume that there's something wrong with them. But the truth is that's mental chatter. It's universal. Every person, every athlete has it. The difference is whether they have tools to deal with it. And that's where great coaches stand out. They normalize the mental game. They talk about how important it is to work on it, and they talk about it openly. So by creating space for it in practice and in just general conversations, and they treat mental skills like physical skills, i.e. they're trainable, then this really helps because it opens up that space so that athletes can talk about things that are happening, things that they're going through. Let's look at John Wooden. He didn't just focus on plays and drills when he was coaching basketball. He focused on how his players made decisions under pressure. So he designed practices that tested their awareness, their timing, and their response to pressure situations. And he once says, it's what you learn after you know it all that counts. And that means the learning doesn't stop because you can skate fast or shoot hard. The inner game always matters, and you should always be learning. So here's a practical way that you as a coach can bring this into your coaching. Try starting each practice with a short mental check-in, right? You can call it the mental game minute. And you ask questions. You ask what's been on your mind today. I always talk to athletes and coaches about having a traffic light system, right? So when they're at green, everything's good, everything's flowing the way that they're feeling, the way that they want to, and thinking the way they want to, and acting the way they want to. Yellow is where trouble's starting, and they think something has happened. They're kind of thrown off a little bit. And then red is they're not in control. They're very emotional and irrational. So maybe that's a question you can ask, right? Who feels a green light today, yellow or red? Getting them to think about what they're going to focus on during practice. So asking the question, what's one thing you want to mentally focus on today? And this gets athletes used to reflecting, but also checking in on themselves, being self-aware of what's happening, right, up here and throughout their body. What is going on? So talking about this openly it also takes away any shame or stigma. It also builds something super important, which is psychological safety. And when players feel safe, then they start to take more risks because they know if I make a mistake, my coach isn't going to shout at me. He's going to praise me for trying my hardest or trying to take a risk. And when they're in this state, athletes are more coachable. They're more likely to bounce back from those setbacks very quickly. And they feel that if there's an issue, then they can come and speak to you about it. And that's exactly what we want. Talk about it openly. Setbacks and struggles that you've had as a coach, right? Your day-to-day life. These are things that have been happening. So the athletes then understand this isn't just me, right? Everybody else has to deal with these issues and problems too. So let's talk about mistakes. And this one really hits home with a lot of people, especially athletes. Most of them are terrified of messing up. Not because they're lazy, but because they've tied their identity to how they perform. And I see this all the time with athletes. One bad shift and they're beating themselves up for the next 10 minutes or the rest of the game. One mistake and they're afraid that they've lost their coach's trust. I see people making mistakes and the first thing they do is look to the coaches or their parents. What are they doing right now? What are they saying? What's their body language? They feel that they've lost the coach's trust. If they get benched or criticized as soon as they've made a mistake, then they don't learn from it. They shrink. And then they go back into the game and they'll try and play it safe because they don't want to make a mistake, because they don't want that to happen again. So they're not going to try as hard. Or the opposite. They feel like they need to make it up to you. So they're going to go and try even harder. And we all know that that often leads to more mistakes. So if you can handle mistakes differently and use them as teaching moments, not punishments, because we all know, everybody says everybody makes mistakes. It's part of the game. But when you're in that moment, it is harder to respond in a positive way, in a calm way. So let's go back to John Wooden again. He once said, if you're not making mistakes, you're not doing anything. So he actually expected players to make mistakes because it meant that they were stretching themselves. It meant that they were putting themselves outside of their comfort zone. So here's a way to help your athletes recover faster from mistakes. Get your athletes to have a reset button, a routine that they can go to when they have made a mistake or something has happened, right? To get them to that yellow or red light that we just talked about. And what I get athletes to do is have a routine, and we go through the 3 R's. So the first one is recognize. The first thing they need to do is recognize that they are not in control. They are frustrated. They're not where they need to be. So this goes back to the traffic light system. And this goes back to the importance of self-awareness, of what is going on up here in their body, what's happening. Looking for signs that they aren't where they need to be. So when I ask athletes what's typically happening when they're at a yellow or a red, what are you saying? What are you doing? So they'll come up with certain things that happen, right? They'll feel frustrated. They're squeezing the stick a little bit tighter. Their body language changes. Maybe they're saying something to themselves, or they'll just feel off, right? Something's not quite right. So once they recognize that, then they can release it by taking a breath and or having a physical action. So this could be them squeezing the stick, biting down on their mouth guard. Maybe it's wiping your hand on your jersey. Something that they can do that signifies them releasing this frustration or this mistake. And then they refocus by saying something that brings them back to the present moment. And it could just be focus. What now? Next play, right? So they need to recognize what just happened without judgment. So they're just aware of what's happened. There's no judgment attached to it. Then they release, right? So they let go. Use the breath. Use a quick cue like wiping the stick, tapping your shin pads, and then refocus, right? So locking back in and asking, what's my next play? It can be, okay, that happened. Deep breath, next shift. So it can be very quick. And as a coach, you can support this by asking questions. What did you learn from that mistake? What did you notice? How can you reset faster next time? And you can also, if you know what your players' resets are, you can look for it. if they make a mistake, you can look for how they respond to that situation and praise them. If they carry out this routine, then you can say to them, I saw you go through that routine after that mistake. That was a great job. Because what's the most important thing? It's not the mistake, it's how they respond to that mistake. So the more that you say that you see them trying to reset, going through that routine, the more they're going to do it. So look for those things and praise them going through that reset. And if you do this, plus asking those questions, then you're helping the players rewire their relationship with failure. They're no longer getting shouted at for making a mistake or benched because they make a mistake. They become more confident because they know they have your trust, and if they make a mistake, then nothing bad is going to happen. So they can go out there and express themselves and try things that may or may not come off. They're still going to be aware that it doesn't matter what happens here. And that makes mistakes become data, learning opportunities. It's not drama. It's not a huge deal that people have made a mistake. So we're praising them for how they respond. If they respond appropriately, we're praising them for that response. If you don't see that, then that's where you have to come in and make sure, okay, this is what I want to see, right? Ask questions, such a big thing. If you're just shouting and pointing at them, then they're going to shut down. They're going to stop listening. So ask them questions calmly, what just happened, and recognize that if you're in the middle of a game, emotions are probably running high, right? There's lots of adrenaline going through not just the players, but also yourself. So be mindful of that and kind of how maybe they're thinking and feeling and how you're thinking and feeling. So think about what's the best way to approach this situation. Maybe you just need to leave it until later. If you need to talk about it now, then how do you do that appropriately? But make sure that we're praising the responses that athletes make that are positive responses. Okay, so another big thing that I see is results. So let's talk about that and how to stop athletes from obsessing over them. And it's everywhere, right? Stats, goals, points, rankings, that stuff is all over the place. And it can mess with a player's head. I'm sure it can also mess with coaches and parents' heads as well. So when athletes tie their confidence to those outcomes, the stats and the points, etc., because they can't control all of those, it creates a roller coaster of confidence. They had a good game where they scored. I feel amazing. But then they have a game where they don't score. Therefore, they believe it's a bad game, and then they say, I'm garbage. So as a coach, shifting the focus to the process is going to make such a huge difference. So again, let's go back to John Wooden, and I'll give you a quote here, one of my favorite from him. Success is peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction in knowing you made the effort to become the best you are capable of becoming. And he rarely talked about winning. He talked about effort, consistency, character. He celebrated the way his players showed up, not just the stat sheet. So how do you do this as well? The first thing that you can do is start praising the controllables. When you see someone giving 100% effort, the hustle, when you see someone communicating effectively, when you see someone going into situations that may be uncomfortable, but they're still going in and giving 100%, and they're being resilient if they make a mistake or the game isn't going the way they want it to, but they're still going, right? Staying locked in during adversity, praising all of this instead of great goal, nice job getting that goal, that assist. Those things are great, but we can't purely focus on those things. So maybe try saying, I loved how you kept skating hard and didn't give up on the play, instead of good win. Try saying, I loved how you guys supported each other after that rough second period. And these are the cues that athletes carry with them long term. And the more that you're talking about the process and talking about the effort and the body language and the communication, that's how they start measuring themselves. By effort, by impact, not just by numbers. So after games, highlight 3 process wins. Not goals, not stats, but things like energy, bouncing back from mistakes, leadership moments. And that's what builds real confidence. Get your athletes to think about, during a game, what are the things that you need to focus on? How do we measure success? What does success look like? Because a lot of people, when I ask them, how do you know if you've had a good game or not? They'll say, well, if I scored, right? Or if we won. Or some will say, my coaches or my parents will tell me if I had a good game or not. And I want athletes to think more about this for themselves. So get them to come up with a few things. What are some things that you need to do in your game that you can control so that we can measure success based on those things? So it could be effective communication. It could be 100% effort all the time. It could be finding the space or finishing checks. Lots of things that we can be doing, that we can control, that if I do those 3 things well, then great. That means I've had a successful game. I've done everything that I could control, so therefore I'm happy with that performance. And there's always room to grow. But if we start judging performances purely on outcomes that they can't control, then that's where confidence issues come in. That's where overthinking comes in. And then performances start to dip. So let's look more at the process, things that they can control. Take out some of that focus on the outcome. Okay, so number 4, model composure. Your athletes are always watching you, right? I said that before. When they make a mistake, a lot of people will look to the bench. What is my coach doing? What is my coach saying? So they're always watching you, and they notice the tone of your voice, your reactions, your posture, especially when things get tense. And you can't coach presence if you don't practice it yourself, right? Players that John Wooden coached said he rarely yelled, he never panicked, and he handled every situation with the same steady presence because he planned his behavior ahead of time. One of my favorite quotes from Wooden is, "A leader's most powerful ally is his or her own example." So here's how you can apply this to your team. Use the traffic light system for them and you. Check in before practice and before games. Think about yourself. Where are you right now? Are you red, yellow, or green, right? Red means, you're tense, you're frustrated, overwhelmed. Yellow could be you're unfocused or distracted. And a green is you're calm, focused, and ready. And this helps athletes build that self-awareness. But it also gives you a moment to check in with yourself. If you're in the red, then your tone, your body language, and words are probably feeding anxiety instead of calm. So practice your reset too. Have a reset of your own. Think about, if I notice that I'm getting stressed, tense, overwhelmed, what can I do to help me get back to that green where I'm calm and focused, right? So take a breath. Take a step back and recenter yourself before you respond. You don't need to be emotionless, but you just need to be aware. You need to be aware of what is going on. And when your athletes see that, and they're seeing you taking a breath, then they learn how to do the same. From all of the sessions I've done with teams, when coaches are there and they're engaged, the players are too. The players take the stuff that we work on and they start using it. But when the coach isn't there or isn't really engaged, then the players follow suit. So it all starts with the coach, and they're always looking at you, and they mirror what you're doing. So if you're taking a breath when things are getting stressed and tense, then they're going to learn that's something that they can do as well. And that goes back to the first point of talking about it openly and reducing that stigma. Something that you can do as well to kind of model this composure is have a game face. So I get athletes to make a game face as well, but coaches can really benefit from having one as well. If you go into a game or a practice, how do you want to act? How do you want to feel? When you're at your best, what are you doing? And think of 3 words that would describe that. Whether that is focused, calm, composed, resilient, you can use any of those words. energy. Think about, for you, what are the words that you want to feel, what you want to act like. And once you have those, then that's something that you can repeat, right? Especially when you notice that you're at a yellow or a red light, you can start using those 3 words. And the more you repeat them, the more you're going to feel and act like the way that you want to. So we're not listening to the voice in our heads. We are talking. We're taking control. The 5th and final thing that I wanted to discuss here is coach the person, not just the player. Your athletes are probably juggling a lot. They're not just thinking about the next game, but they're dealing with school, relationships, family dynamics, social media, comparison, sometimes anxiety or burnout. So if you only ever talk about performance, then you're missing the bigger picture. And so are they, because they follow suit. They follow what you do. And John Wooden was famous for knowing everything about his players. Not just their stats, but their birthdays, their families, their values, their goals. He once said, "You can't live a perfect day without doing something for someone who will never be able to repay you." So here's my challenge to you. Once a week, pull 1 or 2 players aside for a non-sport check-in. Ask them how school's going or what's been challenging lately. What are you excited about outside of sport right now? And these small moments build massive trust. When players feel safe, seen, and supported, they play freer. They take more ownership and they feel like they belong. And that's what changes culture and performance. Okay, so let's recap those 5 things. The 5 things great coaches do to build strong athlete mindsets. Number 1, normalize the mental game. Number 2, use mistakes as coaching gold. Number 3, celebrate the process. Number 4, model composure. And number 5, coach the whole person. And these things aren't necessarily complicated, but they take consistency. And more than anything, they take intentionality. So here is your simple challenge. Pick one of these 5 tools and use it at your next practice. Just one of them. And that's all that it takes to start momentum. So send me a message on Instagram at The Mental Game Gym, and let's chat about how I can support your team, your program. And if this episode gave you value, then send it to a coaching friend. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments on this episode. So thanks for listening. Keep coaching with purpose, and I will see you on the next one.